great love. By the way, thank you all to those who have been making Liz and I feel very loved. We appreciate it. And it's not anything that you, of course, you had to do or feel obligated to. Many of you have dropped off meals. Thank you to Gene Wolfe for organizing that. And just the gifts. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. And definitely has made this awkward transition a bit easier. Appreciate it very much. Great forgiveness equals great love. Jesus is in the beginning of his earthly ministry still. This is Luke chapter 7. So it's pretty early in his ministry. And he is hitting celebrity status. All right, so we live in a culture these days where we know what celebrities are. This is kind of a celebrity crazed culture we live in. People become famous for some reason. It's kind of inexplainable at times why people become a celebrity and why they don't become a celebrity. But they got to do something really amazing, typically, not necessarily, but typically they got to be really good at something to become famous. Jesus is becoming a celebrity very quickly. Can you imagine what would happen if someone walked into St. Anthony's Hospital, and where Liz and I had the baby this last week, or 10 days ago, and if they healed everybody in the hospital, just cleared it out. Someone went room to room and said, you're healed, to where the hospital was actually empty. Nobody, nurses having to go home, and hospital executives had to make weird decisions. Do we even need this hospital anymore? This guy just cleared it out. Jesus did that. He stuck around and healed people till everyone was healed. Can you imagine how fast word would get out about this guy? His teachings, his miracles, he was making waves. It didn't take long. In fact, just one event, one time would have been enough to create just a hysteria. Jesus is taking every day, doing incredible things. People are falling in love with him. Of course, people he healed, their lives are changed, their heart is changed. Now, the Pharisees were having a hard time with it. Now, in today's day and age, if you call someone a Pharisee, that's a really harsh cut down, really harsh. But that's just because time, culture, and different things, well, how the Pharisees played this, how they didn't get along with Jesus. But at that time, they were the religious leaders. They were the religious leaders. They were good, okay? They were perceived as good. They were leading the nation religiously. They were having a hard time with this young upstart, this young blood, Jesus, and what he was doing, kind of looking at him kind of, I don't know, trying to measure him. Is he legitimate or not? This is weird. This is definitely weird. So the story begins with Simon, a Pharisee, inviting Jesus over to his house. Let's start reading in verse number 36 of Luke chapter 7. One of the Pharisees desired him that he would eat with him, and he went into the Pharisee's house and sat down to meat. So Simon is skeptical. Kind of reminds me of maybe a second-generation Christian. I'm going to talk about them here this morning. Those that grew up in a Christian home. They know who Jesus is. They've even seen God do amazing things. They know the stories, but just kind of, he's all right. He's all right. Yes, Jesus says good things. That's good. That's fine. I want to learn more about this. Still trying to decide if that's me or not. Seems like Simon's trying to give Jesus a chance here. All of a sudden, while they're eating lunch, something very strange happens, which is a common occurrence with Jesus. Again, his celebrity status. People did weird things around him all the time. One of those things happens right now. A woman who is referred to as a well-known sinner hears that Jesus is in this house eating lunch, and she goes nuts. She goes nuts, goes up to the house, bursts into the home. That's weird. Breaking and entering and all that. That was probably a thing back then. And she goes nuts, worshiping Jesus. Her heart, her life, her mind, she's just all in on Jesus. You can imagine that would make Simon feel uncomfortable. And that's why some Christians, and especially non-Christians, really struggle to understand why people are so sacrificial to Jesus and to his church. That doesn't make sense. That's kind of weird. It's kind of strange. So this woman barges into the lunch. And behold, a woman in the city, which was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus sat at meat in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster box of ointment, verse 38, and stood at his feet behind him weeping. when people are worshiping and praising God, when someone goes a little overboard, it's like, no, this isn't usual. What's up with that person? Simon is confused by this, very confused. In fact, he's not confused, he's upset about it. She stood at his feet weeping, began to wash his feet with tears. That's weird. And did wipe them with the hairs of her head. That's weird. Kissed his feet. Weird again. And anointed them with the ointment. Now when the Pharisee which had bidden him saw it, this is a religious leader, this is someone who knows the Bible very well, very experienced Christian. He's been around, not Christian, very experienced religious leader, Jew. He knows what's right and what's normal, what's culturally acceptable, and tying that into the Bible, and so that was a good tie-in, but he's watching all this. He's trying to measure this Jesus. He spake within himself, not even out loud, spake within himself, saying, this man, if he were a prophet, of course he's not God, if he were even a prophet, would have known who and what manner of woman this is that toucheth him, for she is a sinner. Like Simon in his mind just tunes her out, tunes him out. So what was this woman doing? The Bible doesn't say, but clearly this was a culturally repulsive sin. See, we do that in our culture as Christians. If I had like two boxes, maybe two big cardboard boxes, and one is culturally repulsive sins, and another box over here had a sign on it, somewhat acceptable sins. You know, we know we shouldn't still do them, but the Bible also says that we all have besetting sins. So these are the sins, the people that we'll still talk to, we'll still eat with them, we'll still stay married to them, we'll still socialize with them, we'll still let them be friends with us on social media. That's kind of what we're talking about here today. So really horrible sins, disgusting sins. And can we call it white-collar sins? Can we use that terminology? Everybody does them. It is what it is. So this woman was engaged in one of the sins over here. And for you to really get a lot out of this sermon today, I need you to think of a sin that disgusts you personally, okay? You'll get more out of it. Now, if you just kind of assume in your mind it's one of those sins that you're okay with, then you're not going to get a lot out of this as far as what Simon was going through. It's a thing, you know, in our country for there to be heterosexuals who can be disgusted by homosexuals. Like, that's disgusting. And you know what? That is not connected to the fact that God is against homosexuality. There's no connection there. Yes, God is against it, but the fact that we can be disgusted by it, there's no connection there. That's different. That's more of a cultural thing. So maybe she was a lesbian. Maybe she was transgender. For people who are disgusted by that. That's not okay. That's not okay. Now, lying, okay. But transgender, not okay. Maybe she was a child molester. We can definitely, all of us, whole world, can agree on that one. Maybe, we don't know. Maybe she was a child molester. Just, that's nasty. Maybe she was a thief. Maybe she was the one who cut you off on the way to church this morning. And you're just angry at that person. So for some reason, she was involved in something that was just culturally repulsive. That also was something that God says, no, you should not do that. Simon watches this woman just completely devoted in worship and sacrifice to Jesus. He turns Jesus off at that moment and says, this cannot be a prophet. This is definitely not God. I know what she's involved in. You know, Muslims, some people are really freaked out about Muslims. Maybe something like that, just these different, not okay sins, so to speak. Things that bother us. She was involved in at least one, maybe more. Simon says there's no way that Jesus should be associating with that person. Jesus says in verse 40, Jesus answering said unto him, Simon, I have something I want to say to you. He saith, Master, say on. Of course, Simon has no idea Jesus can read his mind. And here we go. Here's the parable. Verse 41, there was a certain creditor which had two debtors. The one owed 500 pence and the other 50. And when they had nothing to pay, he frankly forgave them both And that's it. That's the parable. I want to explain it visually for you here this morning. So I've got behind me a rabbit, and I've got a donkey. Okay, so I'm going to move the pulpit out of the way just here for a second here. And let's just say that these two stuffed animals come alive. It's a miracle, okay? And they're a bit entrepreneur-ish. They want to get a business started, all right? So the rabbit wants to become a farmer and grow lettuce and sell it and make a profit. The donkey wants to be a filmmaker, okay? He's got this great idea to film in a movie where he stars alongside an ogre, and they're gonna make a movie. They're gonna become really famous, the rabbit and the donkey. So I'm the investor, and I'm interested in helping their businesses get started. I believe in what they're doing here. So the rabbit tells me that rabbit bunny tells me he needs $1. So I said, fine, I'm going to invest in that. So I give him the $1. And the donkey says, you know what, it's a bit more expensive to pull off movies. It's really hard to do. I'm going to need more money. So I agreed to it. So bam, the donkey gets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think you get it, all right? 10 times. Donkey get 10 times the amount of money. I come back 6 months later to get my investment back, and the rabbit says, ooh, bad news. I ate all the lettuce. It was delicious, though, but I'm so sorry. I cannot give you your $1 back. I really wish I could. The donkey, I go to the donkey. Where's my $10 back? Man, you got a lot more. Where's my $10? And the donkey says, well, as it turns out, there was already a movie franchise with a donkey and an ogre, and I got sued, and the movie never released, and we already spent it. So sorry, John, we don't have your $10. And for me, being the magnanimous person that I am, I say to the rabbit and the donkey, you know what? Both of you, you're fine. Don't worry about it. You're both forgiven of the debts. And then Jesus asks Simon, tell me therefore, which of them will love him most, the rabbit or the donkey? And Simon's going to say here in a second, well, of course, the donkey. And this can be a little bit tough as far as the rabbit goes, seeing that the donkey got way more forgiveness. And when they had nothing to pay, I want to read one more time. He frankly forgave them both. Tell me therefore, which of them will love him most? Simon says, the donkey. No, he didn't say the donkey, but let's read it. Verse 43, Simon answered and said, I suppose that he to whom he forgave most. And he said to him, thou hast rightly judged. Simon's got to be feeling pretty good about himself. Okay, yeah, I got this. Now Jesus proceeds to rip him. All right, so here we go. Verse 44, and he turned to the donkey and said to the rabbit, not really, and he turned to the woman and said unto Simon, seest thou this woman? I entered into thine house, your house. You gave me no water for my feet. She has washed my feet with tears and wiped them with the hairs of her head. Thou gavest me no kiss, but this woman, since the time I came in, hath not ceased to kiss my feet. My head with oil thou didst not anoint, but this woman hath anointed my feet with ointment. If you're going to take one statement home from this sermon, I'd love you to take home the one that's going to pop up on the screen right now. Great sin plus great forgiveness equals great love. Great sin plus great forgiveness equals great love. We're going to read Jesus basically say this equation right here in the next verse, verse 47. Wherefore I say unto thee, her sins, which are many, he's acknowledging that. We're not ignoring anything. We're not sweeping anything under the rug. It's not happening here. She's a sinner on a pretty big scale. Which are many? Are forgiven. Great sins. Great forgiveness. And then the next wording here. For she loved much. Great sins matched with great forgiveness that only God could do is going to produce great love. This woman was just all in for Jesus. All in. She didn't care about breaking into the home. She didn't care as far as her pride. She shouldn't even be alive. Everything she has, she knows she has it because of Jesus. great sin plus great forgiveness. She experienced it, true repentance. She acknowledged it. She didn't hide it. She didn't cover it up. She acknowledged it, great sin plus great forgiveness. She received God's forgiveness. She didn't push it back and say, no, I don't deserve it. I deserve to fall apart and be a wreck for the rest of my life. I don't deserve that. So she received it. Great sin plus great forgiveness equals great love. She was exuding all kinds of passionate love for Jesus. Great sin plus great forgiveness equals great love. This reminds me of something that I like to say every now and then, that is this. When you experience regret for the first time, I mean, when you really blow it, and not something little, not some everyday thing, but when you, I mean, really blow it and wound maybe the person you care about most in this world, or people that you care about, and you just really let them down, and this pain shoots into your hearts, and your heart and your stomach are just destroyed, and it hurts like, oh, why did I do that? Let them down. I'm not sure they'll ever forgive me for what I did. And in that moment where you feel like you've blown it forever, when you have truly experienced, in every sense of the word, regret. I'm just going to say this. I feel like in some ways, your life is actually beginning right then, where you can, the equation has begun here. Great sin plus great forgiveness, where you have these series of events can begin to transpire here where you can actually love people unconditionally. Where it may actually not be about you. When you've hurt people, you've really let them down. But you have humbled yourself. You've had a Psalm 51 experience like David had. You've just broken. Say, God, I have messed up. God, I feel like there was a day in my life where it would have meant something if I would have given my life to you. I didn't. It was all about me. And I have messed up so much. My life is in ashes. I'm offering my ashes to you. Like, I feel so embarrassed. But I'm giving them to you. And God receives it. He forgives you. Some really great things can come from that. It's possible. It's possible. Some really great things. If you've experienced regret, it's not necessarily over. Great sin plus great forgiveness equals great love. Got another statement I want to share with you. Little sin plus little forgiveness equals little love. I believe we get here a relational pro tip on life. I think this can apply to all of our relationships. First and foremost, our love for God. If we really, at the end of the day, don't feel like God has forgiven us of that much, been pretty good. God has forgiven me of my great sin of I didn't take out the trash that one time. I didn't make my bed. I think we are diving into one of the biggest challenges of raising Christian kids. This is a huge challenge. I believe their capacity to love God is greatly hindered. Little sin plus little forgiveness equals little love, a very small capacity to be able to love. It's going to be a bit superficial. It's going to be a bit shallow. Let's read the next verse. Let me see here, verse 47, same verse. Wherefore I say unto thee, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little. The same loveth little. Jesus is not saying here his love for us is conditional. He is saying your love towards him may be conditional. Little sin plus little forgiveness equals little love. Every marriage Every spouse, we yearn for our spouse to love us intimately, unconditionally, for the rest of our lives. I just want to say something here. When our spouse or anyone hurts us deeply, it's not necessarily over. And you have been given, you that has been hurt, you have been given an opportunity. You have been given an opportunity to begin a series of a chain of events that could lead to that epic scale of love that you have always wanted in the first place. I mean, you can bolt if you want to. People do that. And you know what? I'm not going to be the one to judge what a spouse does in that type of situation when they've been hurt to their core. I'm not going to be the one to judge. And yes, it's possible that the offending spouse will take something like this and abuse it. And that's just a low-down son of a gun, all right? So I don't know. It's heavy, but all I'm saying is there's a chance. There's a chance that your relationship could progress past this. Maybe this is where it's been for all these years. Seemed fine. It seemed rosy. Maybe at the end of the day it was. It did look like this. Little sin plus little forgiveness equals little love. This is a huge challenge for those of us raising kids. Those of us, and all parents, we don't want our kids to mess up. We don't want our kids to get into great sin. And how can we get them to love God intensely if they don't mess up? Secondly, I want to say, this is why, can you go back to great sin plus great forgiveness? This is why it's very important that we as Christian parents, that we don't give up if our kids fall into great sin. We don't give up. We don't give up. We don't throw in the towel. We don't wallow in depression and feel sorry for ourselves for the rest of our lives. We don't do that. There's a lot of reasons why we shouldn't do that, but this is one of them, this parable from Jesus. The equation could very well be started. Great sin plus great forgiveness equals great love. You want your kid to love God more than anything? Is that what you want? Is that what you want, or do you not want that? Which one is it? Great sin plus great forgiveness equals great love. All I'm saying is let's not give up. We never give up. The story's not over yet. The story's not over yet. Let's keep going. So, now that we've seen Jesus give this parable of those who have been forgiven, of many sins was the little word, the actual wording, or great sin, can fully receive great forgiveness, and from that can exude passionate, over the top, all in love for God, like this woman did at that lunch with Simon. Does that mean that we should get involved in great sin? I mean, that's where my brain goes. Do you have an analytical mind? That's where I'm at. Like, wait a minute. What about the good church kids? Should I plan and pull off a rager party tonight here at church and just go all in? We're going to advertise it. There's going to be lots of sin at this party, and it's going to be great. Folks, we want our kids to truly love God. That's where my brain goes. Maybe your brain is better than my brain, but that's where my brain goes. Should I get involved in great sin? We're going to play a little side deal here. It's called Should I? Should I? Should I murder my neighbor so I can go to jail and enjoy free cable? I mean, it's technically true. But no, that's not a good idea, to murder my neighbor so I can go to jail and enjoy free cable. Folks, there's much better ways to enjoy free cable these days, much easier ways. And I'm kidding. No, I'm not. All right, so the next one. Should I kill myself so my wife can claim my death insurance policy? Should I? And I think people have tried it before, and it better not look like a suicide because they won't get it. You can't get insurance money for your spouse that way. It's a bit extreme. You know, there's easier ways to make money. That's not a good idea. Please don't consider that. No. Should I chop off my arms and legs so I can claim disability and never have to work again? Wouldn't that be great? Just those checks coming in the mail like clockwork. Getting spoon-fed by someone because I have no arms and legs. Wouldn't that just be amazing? No. Like there's things worse than working a job. It's not a good idea. 2 more. Should I become homeless so I can enjoy free meals from soup kitchens? Years ago, I was involved in a faith-based addiction programs on Friday nights, and there was a community, a city soup kitchen just down the street, a shelter. I walked down there one time to invite those that were in there, homeless people essentially, to come down to our program. I walk in, instantly smell something amazing, and it was dinner time. And I look over, and they got these like catered, like silverware, and this like as if they got this expensive catering done, and there's roast beef and corn and rolls, this incredible dessert. I'm like, what is up? All right, where's my roast beef? I did not eat that good tonight. These guys are eating better than me. They didn't even pay for it. The thought might have crossed my mind, at least for a second. Should I become homeless so I can enjoy free meals? No, you should not do that. Not a good idea. Although if you do it, I won't judge you. All right? Last one, should I get involved in grievous sins in order to love God more? Should I get involved in grievous sins in order to love God more? No, that is not a good idea. And why? Why is it not a good idea? Because of my next statement. Great sin equals great pain. Great sin equals great pain. See, this is my strong opinion in how I view sin. And I'd be very happy if all of you here today, and maybe everyone watching online, hi Liz, if you're watching, this is how I believe very strongly how sin should be viewed. Anything God tells us not to do in the Bible, the only reason he tells us to do it is because it will hurt us. And that's it. That's it. And I do not like it when people inadvertently view God as this cranky, stubborn, old Christian school principal who their only goal in life is to think up rules to take away the fun from all of the kids. It's not God. He didn't just come up with these bizarre, as if he gets some weird, twisted thrill out of taking away your life and your career and your fun. God does not operate that way. Anything in his book that he says don't do that, it's only to prevent you from getting in trouble, for only prevent you from wrecking your life. And that's it. There's no other reason of why he would have put it in there. I believe that very strongly. So even if there's things in here that don't make sense to me, then that's it. It may not make sense to me is why that's in there, but I trust God that he's just trying to help me, prevent me from getting into trouble. Great sin equals great pain. I also believe that God does not necessarily come down and punish us hard anytime we sin, as if he's got some kind of like a yardstick. Anytime you sin, whap, and he just hits you with it. He does do it at times. Whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth. But I believe very strongly that most of the time when we sin, God does not punish us. We just face the consequences of our actions. It's a natural progression. Pain. Don't touch the electrical socket. If a child touches the inside of an electrical socket and they get shocked, they got their punishment. You know, if someone gets involved in great sin, I believe great pain is just around the corner. It's like, just send the ambulance. Like, it's so many people are going to be wounded people everywhere. Great sin equals great pain. Carrying over from my sermon 2 weeks ago, parables of Jesus. The one who built their house on sand. This is building your life on sand. Ignoring Jesus, ignoring God's word. I got this. I don't need to dig deep as far as my foundation. I'll find something else to be the core of my beliefs other than God. Building your life on sand. It's going to be a great fall, as that parable said. You guys remember that from 2 weeks ago? A great fall. Great sin equals great pain. So no, we should not dive into grievous sins and hurt ourselves and everyone around us on some kind of a twisted crusade to try and claim God's love like this woman did. It's not a good idea at all. Because here's the truth of the matter. I'm coming towards the end of the sermon here. Here's the truth of the matter. You are a sinner of epic proportions. You are. You are a sinner of epic proportions. You just may not realize it yet. Your brain may just be wrapped up in these two areas of sins that I was talking about earlier in the sermon. I've never killed anyone. Never cheated on my spouse. Definitely not a homosexual. I'm not Muslim. I'm okay. As far as in our minds, you know, the one-liner, little sin plus little forgiveness equals little love. I think another way it could be worded, and I got this from someone who was in the 9 a.m. service, who said it to me after. I thought it was so good, I'm saying it right now. Different way to word it. Minimizing sin. Another good way to word that. Minimizing sin plus minimizing God's forgiveness equals little love. You are a sinner of epic proportions. That is the truth of the matter. You are. You are. We have these strange sin boundaries that we have drawn up of what we think is okay and not okay. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. God says that our righteousness, not our sins, our righteousness is as filthy rags. In the sight of God, you are an epic sinner. Just do you see it that way? Do you see it that way? You know, I will say that if someone gets engaged in grievous, culturally repulsive sins that are also in the Bible that say we should not do, it does make it a little bit easier. Like, for instance, if someone goes to jail and they hit rock bottom, that can, kind of like an eye test. You ever done an eye test? Read these letters. EJLQP. Great. Read the next row. You know, it gets smaller and smaller. It's kind of like that. To where if on the screen, if I was to put a really small dot on the center of the screen, do you see that dot? Do you see it? There's not a dot up there. You can't see it, but it's hard to see. It can be hard to see as far as how we view our own sins, which will in turn cause us to have trouble seeing God's forgiveness. And then if we put this massive black dot that took up the whole screen, do you see that dot? Yes, of course we see it. It can be a little bit easier to see it. When we talk about a first-generation Christian or a second-generation Christian who has just royally blown it, it can be a little bit harder if we're sticking within the realm of culturally accepted sins. You are a sinner of epic proportions. We're still on that. Do you believe that here this morning? Can we all agree on that? You don't need to get involved in massive, grievous sins, so to speak, as far as what our culture dictates, what our Christian culture dictates. I'm still trying to prove my point on that. I'm trying to get everyone to agree on that you are a sinner of epic proportions. Let me give you another illustration before I get into the verse that I actually want to get to. The Old Testament, a very hardcore time. I believe it was just a barbaric time in human history. It was a kill or be killed era. And God consequently was a little bit harsh how we would view it as far as he dealt with the Jews. If you were to take the top sins as far as why God killed Israelites in the Old Testament, I've never done this, like pulled all the verses and compared it perfectly, but I'll tell you this. Number one, God killed a lot of people for sexual sins. He did, no doubt. However, I suspect he actually killed more Jews in the Old Testament for murmuring. Ooh, God did not like murmuring. And I'm pretty confident. You can do the Bible study on your own if you like this week. I'm pretty confident God actually took out more Jews in the Old Testament for complaining than he did for sexual sins. Can your brain handle that? Can you? You know, I am not under the thinking that all sins are equal, okay? I don't believe that. And if someone does, we shouldn't judge someone by their sin. Sin is sin. Like, I get what they're saying, but I'm okay with the thinking, and this is, I think we're in the opinion realm. I want to make sure we're talking about that. I'm okay with the thinking that our sins are worse than others. but I'm not sure we are equipped to do that. I think if we try and do that, really horrible sins down to, still a sin, shouldn't do it, but not that big of a deal. I think if God actually did that, it would look very different than ours. You are a sinner of epic proportions. Do you believe me yet? Are we on the same page yet? Almost? Let's go to a verse. There's a couple of verses in the Bible where it just lists really bad sins, okay? And this verse is going to end with, you're going to go to the lake of fire, all right? That escalated real fast. Let's look at these terrible sins in the Bible. Let's see which box you would put them in. Revelation 21 and verse 8. The fearful. What? The fearful? The fearful. The fearful. You know, we get so caught up in our culture, whether it's Christian or secular, everybody deciding what's really horrible and what's acceptable. And then we read the Bible, and God really messes things up. Thanks, God. The fearful and unbelieving. You sure God's going to come through for you in this crisis you're going through right now? The unbelieving and the abominable and murderers. Finally a sin that I would put in my box of really culturally repulsive sins. Thank God there's at least one of them on there. Whoremongers, sexual sins. Sorcerers, generally that's viewed as witchcraft, and drugs. Mind-altering drugs are typically referred to as sorcerers. Idolaters, and all liars. Whoops. And all liars. And all Americans, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone. God, are you sure we're talking about? Yeah, if we could take our pen and like mark this verse up, we would, wouldn't we? Little sin or minimize sin plus little forgiveness or us minimizing our sin. It's going to cause us to be like Simon. Yeah, God, he's fine. He's good. Yes, Yes, I memorized some of those verses. Great verses there. I got some good candy for memorizing them as a kid. Yes, I guess God's a part of my life. Fine. But just looking so different than that woman and that devotion all in. It can make us uncomfortable when someone in a worship service is just praising God. Woo, God is the best. And here's this person who is more along the lines of little sin plus little forgiveness equals little love, just kind of confused and maybe even a little condescending towards the person who's passionately all in for Jesus. Maybe even a little critical. The great sins of God in Revelation 21 and verse 8. Some talk about that. Your capacity to love God. Your capacity to love God. This is so practical. I'm a practical person. How can we love God? Here it is. Here's a really great, easy to understand equation where you can measure it in your heart and your life. If in your heart of hearts you're struggling and actually sincerely loving God, you could be hitting a nail on the head right here. Your capacity to love God is based on your understanding of how much he has forgiven you. One more one-liner will be dismissed. I really want to just reword it in very simple terms. I'd like you to chew on this. Really trying to help you analyze your mind and heart. Here it is. Here's the crux of the matter. As we look at Simon the Pharisee and the woman who's referred to as a great sinner, here it is. The difference between the two. Jesus is the hero. Jesus is the hero. I got a news flash for all of us here in this room today. Your life has never been about you. And it will never be about you. It's about Jesus. Jesus is the hero, not you. And if you're not there yet, if you still feel like in your mind, you know, actually, I think maybe it is about me. I think it is about me. I believe you're building your life on sand, and ultimately you are headed for a great fall. And that may necessarily be the worst thing in the world. I mean, it will hurt, and you will feel that baggage for the rest of your life. It's a hard road. It is. There's nothing easy about it. But at some point, I believe we all will recognize that Jesus is the hero. I want to talk about superheroes just for a second. I talk about superheroes a lot, don't I? I feel they make great connections to these truths. There's been a couple of superhero movies. They're pumping them out like once a week. A lot of superhero movies coming out these days. Several of the movies, I haven't seen the newer ones, but maybe a year or two ago, where the superheroes are fighting against each other, where they go at it. Even the good ones. Like, can I say a movie? Like Marvel Civil War or Batman versus Superman. Okay, I'm done name dropping movies. You know, Superman, thank you for saving us, but you destroyed half the city. You were flying into skyscrapers. Skyscrapers, there were people in those buildings. Maybe Superman is not as great as we thought he was. You know, analyzing and critiquing. You know, the other movie that I mentioned, it's often based on miscommunication. And maybe we've always thought he was good. And, you know, maybe he's actually a low-down son of a gun anyway. I think I'll fight him. That dialogue is just so different than if someone in that movie, or you in your life, so to speak, metaphorically, are standing on top of a building that is on fire, and there is no way for you to get down to the ground, and Superman flies up there, grabs you, and you fly down to the ground. It's a euphoric, surreal experience, and you're on the ground. It's over for you. Superman is a hero. That's it. All this noise and the media coverage as far as, you know, in those movies, is Superman good or not? It's over. He saved you. He saved you. He delivered you. Conversation over. You're going to be a massive fan of that superhero forever, no matter what anybody says. It will not change your mind. That's what we're talking about here today with this parable. Great sin plus great forgiveness equals great love. You're going to love him. Jesus is the hero. It's not about you. Your life is not about you. You can try as hard as you can to make it about you. It's not going to work. You're going to get yourself into trouble. You will see Jesus helping you out, delivering you. I believe we're all going to end up there anyways. Let's save ourselves some time and pain and suffering and realize that we are sinners of epic proportions. God is our creator. God is our savior. He is the hero, not me. Great sin that we are all engaged in. Fearful. You didn't forget that verse, did you? Fearful, unbelievers, and all liars. We are all sinners of great proportions. We are all in need of God-sized great forgiveness. And when we receive it and claim it and bask in it, a great and passionate love for God exudes from it. And then when our love for God is firing in all cylinders, look at Ephesians 4:32. I skipped that verse, last verse. And be ye kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another. Man, this is great marriage advice. This is great relational advice for everyone, for families, friends, everyone. What's the secret ingredient at the end of the verse? Even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. Your capacity to love God, and you know what? Your capacity to love your spouse, your capacity to love your friends, all of it. This is relational gold right here. It's based on our understanding of how much God has forgiven you. If you could please bow your heads and close your eyes.